Hi everybody, my name is B and I am welcoming you on my surgery journey, or rather weight loss journey, and I'm going to introduce myself to you today. And introduction videos, I think, probably have to be the hardest thing in the world to do because you're trying to take a lifetime's worth of information and consolidate it into like 5, maybe 7 minutes max. So consider this the Cole's Notes version of an introduction, and I'm going to try to touch on the things that I talk about in way more detail over the course of time of doing this. So I'm B. I'm originally from New York, New York, and so I will probably pepper all of my videos with F-bombs. And I now live in Canada. I'm going to try to remain as anonymous as I can because I do want a little privacy in this process, but at the same time, I want to give you enough information to give you some context about me. So I am 43, I'll be 44 in a month. So let's just say 44, let's just like cut to the chase here. And I am going to be having a vertical sleeve gastrectomy surgery sometime in August. I don't know exactly when because I'm living in Canada now. I've had my first vaccine, but we're still in tighter levels of restriction than the United States. And we've just introduced interprovincial travel, which is basically from state to state, but they're being still a little cagey and holding off to phase 3, as it's called, in terms of making any decisions about travel internationally and then what that will look like. And because I'm going to be needing to move from 2 countries, so I'll go from Canada to US to Mexico, kind of complicates things a little bit. So I've just been kind of slowly but surely getting all my ducks in a row so that when the time comes, I can just like kind of shoot down there. Because I still have this fear, I don't know if any of you also have it, that like, yeah, we're all vaccinated, we're heading into summer, which is not flu season, but God forbid there should be a 3rd or a 4th wave or something in early fall, a new variant or whatever. There's this fear in the back of my mind that maybe this all won't end. So I want to try to do it as soon as possible. I'd like to do it in August. The other reason why I'd like to do it in August is I had my first bariatric surgery at the end of July, many moons ago. So almost 12 or 13 years. I'm so bad with math. I'm going to put this out here like now, like you'll hear me say I was 20 pounds heavier or 15. Consider it like a loose with give or take 5 and give or take like a year or 2. I'm really bad at keeping track of all of that sort of stuff. So about 12, maybe, oh no, it would have been about 13 years. 13 years ago was when I had my lapband surgery. And that was at the end of July. So I kind of like the idea of like staying close to that range of dates. So you're like, oh, okay. What happened? Why are you doing this again? So when I had my lapband surgery, I think I weighed 275 or maybe a bit more, maybe like 280 or something like that, or 282 or again, like, I don't know, consider it within 5 pounds or whatever when I first started. Then I did my pre-op diet and I believe I got around to 277 pounds. Let's go with that. This was a long time ago. And then I remember when I did my lapband surgery, I lost 30 pounds within the first month. And then I don't remember what it was month to month, but I just remember 30 pounds because that was just, it might even have been 32. It was just such an astounding number for me. So I then continued to lose, and over the course of my weight loss journey, which started actually before the lapband surgery, I've lost and maintained over 150 pounds. So if you are watching this now, gastric sleeve is sort of like the new lapband. And lapband, when I did it back in the day, it was like advertised as this great, safe way to have a bariatric surgery without the extremeness of a gastric bypass. It was reversible, and it was not going to cause problems, and it's just this little tiny thing around your stomach, no big deal. As it turns out, they really don't even do gastric banding anymore because there are so many problems, and it wasn't even an effective surgery. So Weirdly enough, though, despite all of that, I was one of the people who I was a success story so I had my surgery in Mexico, but I did have a surgeon here where I live who was kind of looking after me and doing my fills. And constantly, I work as a writer and I write for politicians. I'm kind of transitioning out of things, so I don't even know what to say I do anymore right now. Like, I do the things, and mostly I raise kids right now. I do plan on continuing to work, but I don't know what that is just yet. So in the past, I worked as a writer, for a professional writer, and I would work for politicians. I did ghost writing, I did adult writing, and that actually paid really well. So I've done lots of different kinds of writing, and my surgeon knew that because he knew some of the politicians that I had worked with, and he was always like, let's write a book together because you're the only patient, and you're not even my patient, who has maintained her weight loss over the years with gastric banding. And, like, kind of like, you're the success story, da-da-da-da-da. And then, lo and behold, I got pregnant with my second child, and I had gained a significant amount of weight back. And so that's kind of where this isn't going to be your typical gastric surgery, yay, channel. I'm really all about a more nuanced discussion and a health at every size approach, and talking about the idea that those of us who get bariatric surgery are large people. We are people that are probably just larger by nature. Like, I feel like there isn't really like a discussion of like, if you get to the point of being 250 pounds easily, because like someone like my husband, it would be almost impossible. I've been married to him for 20 some odd years now. The man is constitutionally incapable of getting to 250 pounds. He would have to like spend all his time trying to eat to gain weight. And meanwhile, like it's very easy for me. My body stores and retains fat. And so I think there's a lot of complicated stuff that's a huge cultural impact, and even a medical side of things, which I don't say is my forte, but I am a research junkie. When you work as a writer for so many years, part of your role really is as a researcher. So there will be a lot of that in there. But basically, I did regain my weight, but only after about 11 years or so. I did regain a little bit of weight prior. And so I'll kind of go into weights, and I'll do like the quickest little touch on sort of why or what was going on in my life at that time, to kind of give you a little bit of context, and then I'll kind of just like move it along. So my lowest weight after surgery was probably within, like a year and a half or so. No, maybe like a year, or like a year and 1 or 2 months or something like that. Was 173 pounds at that time. So that probably still sounds like, to your average, diet person, like, oh, that's still heavy. But I was like a size 8, 10, and I was running 10K and lifting very heavy weights. So I was super muscular. So I'm the kind of person, which I didn't know, having been fat all my life until I lost a lot of weight. I put on a ton of muscle. Like, I get really muscular. So it didn't translate as 173. Like, you wouldn't look at me and be like, oh, that's a big girl. You would think, okay, she's a size 8, kind of thing. So, and for the record, I don't think of a size 8, 10 or whatever. That's not big to me, but I'm talking about how society thinks sometimes. I was happy with it. I was like, it at that point, at 173 pounds, it was like my full-time job plus a part-time job to stay at that weight. I was having to run 10K several times a week, like I said, doing heavy lifting, and basically existing on 1,100 calories a day. And that was like about a year and a bit into it. And that's when things start to change for you as a bariatric surgery patient. You start to get a little bit hungrier. It's not like you're trying to be not compliant, but after a year of eating mostly liquids and mushies, and like, especially back then, you were told to basically live off of protein shakes. You're like, yeah, I would like, some chicken cordon bleu. I'm not even saying that you break the rules with like Mars bars. You're just hungry for something other than your safe foods. I was hungry, I was exhausted, and I was finding that trying to get below 173 was requiring too much physical and emotional work and deprivation, and even looking at it realistically, I was like 1200 calories is just 1200 calories. 1200 was on my non-run days, and I would try to do 1100 on my run days. That was my thinking at the time. It was just not enough, and so I allowed myself to get up to 177, and I stayed there for 5 years. And that was an easy weight for me to maintain with a lap band. I was able to be very active, which I found that I just naturally enjoyed. I really enjoyed weightlifting. I was never a super fast runner, but I could totally, I was in the middle of the pack. So I could do my 10Ks or my, 12, 13, 14, 15. I never did a full marathon, only a half. So I just, I had respectable numbers, but I was just never a speedy runner or anything like that. It was so much like my personality, consistent. So I maintained 177 for quite a long time, about 5-ish years. And then I was trying to get pregnant, and we had all the odds stacked against us. And so that's a whole other series of videos, but suffice to say, after many, many years of steroids and hormones, because we had to go to IVF, we and did several rounds of IVF with hormones and steroids, put on about 20 pounds. Yeah. During that course of that time. I was also on antidepressants and things like that, and I went from 0 to 100 in terms of antidepressants, because I was having so many miscarriages and pregnancy losses, and just bogged down by it all. But still, I was, at 200 pounds, I was wearing a size 10 and 10, 12, I guess, and very healthy and eating a beautiful diet, I would say. It was really good balance for me. And even then, I knew I would still get comments but you're 200 pounds, you shouldn't be 200 pounds. Even that surgeon that I was talking about earlier I could see I had lost some of his respect. And honestly, I didn't care, because I knew that I had come by this extra weight honestly, and in the sense that life happens, and if you're a person in a larger body and you have lost 150 pounds, to gain 20 pounds back, I don't think it's a big deal, especially when you're going through IVF and multiple pregnancy losses. You gotta do what you gotta do. And I didn't gain that weight because I was overeating. I gained that weight because of something that I have noticed over time, having been in the weight loss surgery world for a really long time, and just knowing a bunch of people who've also had it, who are way further out in their surgery journey. What happens is, after you've lost a significant amount of weight, your basal metabolic rate is going to drop, because your body has been in famine mode, whether intentional or unintentional, for a really long time. So your basal metabolic rate, or your BMR, is the lowest, or the basic, or your basement level of calories or energy that your body needs to run its bodily functions. So thinking, growing hair, all the things your body needs to be able to do, moving from room to room, making a cup of tea. Those are all your base level. That's what I'm trying to say. Your base level calories to run your body. It lowers so that your body can be more efficient after not receiving energy for a sustained period of time. At that same time, one of the things that happens with bariatric surgery is you start to stretch your pouch, your stomach, your sleeve, your pouch, whatever. It's very similar for sleeve and band folks, if you look at the statistics, whereas gastric bypass patients tend to have less stretch, or even less wiggle room for that. And someone could say, oh, well, you stretched your pouch because you were eating bad food. But one thing, if you've been, and I don't know if this is the same for sleeve, but I think based on kind of my conversations with people and the research that I've done, I think so. Slider foods don't really stretch your pouch. It's the healthy foods. And in my case, I found that vegetables were my biggest quote unquote pouch stretchers. But what happens is, like I said, you have this convergence of events where your body, the surgical effects of cutting off that ghrelin start to decrease, so that you actually start to feel hungry again. So then you need to eat a little more. And you want this to be, your surgeon even wants this to happen, a very gradual process. So not like you stretch your pouch in 6 months, but that you slowly over years and years and years eat just slightly larger portions to reach satiety. Like there's, like no one has a superhuman power to not eat when they're hungry. I mean, yes, it's called anorexia, and in many ways surgery is surgically enforced anorexia. But after a certain point, you've had this now, let's say you've had your surgery, your weight loss, and your tool for 5+ years, you're eventually going to get hungry. And so that's kind of, all of that happened at the same time. And I wasn't mad about it. I knew that despite what they were saying, when I was looking at the research and when I was looking at it realistically without having like a diet culture or fat people are inherently bad sort of bias thing happening, that lens wasn't there. I was able to see it's 20 pounds. It's not the end of the world. If I think I want to figure it out later, I will. I had my first child. I had a little bit of something called hyperemesis gravidarum with him, and it ended around 18-20 weeks. And then I had a good pregnancy, although I had a lot of pelvic problems because of the stuff that had led to us needing to use IVF, and had him. And I think I was then about 214 pounds and then stayed at around 210 until I got, 210 until I got pregnant with number 2, again, using IVF. And with number 2 though, my hyperemesis gravidarum went off the charts. I was extremely sick and was vomiting 40+ times a day. So I had a complete unfill. And if you don't know what that means, with a gastric lapband, it's a silicone tube that goes around your stomach. And so higher up, just below your esophagus, kind of where all of that, like sometimes it feels like it's just like right below your bra band, like right in here. And it creates this little pouch, so basically like your new stomach, and the way that you tighten it or loosen it is by adding liquid or taking the liquid away. And so I had all of mine taken out because I was vomiting 40+ times a day. It made a lot of sense to do that. And there was no nutrition for me at that point. Like I was living off of weird shit, because when you have hyperemesis gravidarum, it's almost like those people who have pica, where they eat clay. They don't want to, but they're like compulsively, their body is drawn to doing it. So it's a very similar thing. Like you can't drink water, but you can drink soda. For me, I had a period of time where all I could drink was root beer, and I couldn't eat anything, but I could only drink root beer. Water I was never able to drink throughout my pregnancy. And it would just be the weirdest foods that you'd be able to keep down, and then other things you'd vomit right back up. So what happened for me is that constant vomiting led to a ton of damage. Even with the unfill, like what we now know is that the lap band actually causes a ton of scarring, a ton of issues. And I knew in the back of my mind, I was always like, I never regretted my lap band surgery, and I'll get into that in a future video, but I always knew in the back of my mind that it was a ticking time bomb. Like as the years went by and the research started to mount about the problems associated with it, I was like following, but also like not wanting to be too aware, because you know how you can have that cognitive dissonance of like, if I'm too aware of this, I'm going to freak out. I'm just going to wait till something happens. Well, then my something happened. And so then that was that hyperemesis, or HG. I had a ton of damage. At the last trimester, they finally put me onto steroids. And the crazy thing is they didn't want to put me on steroids from the beginning, because they felt like, well, at 200 pounds, I maintained that 210 pounds throughout the entire pregnancy. I neither lost nor gained. Wouldn't she want to lose a little bit of weight through vomiting? And that literally was told to me by 2 different doctors. And that's how deep our diet culture is. It's like they wouldn't give you that medication. And it might have turned out to be a good thing, because the steroids actually then further inflamed the band. who knows? Like, I don't know, but even the fact, my point is that we would not give someone, a mother who's pregnant and vomiting 40 plus times a day and needing to be in the hospital and can't take care of her other child, we wouldn't give her the right medication that we know will help. It didn't completely cure it or anything like that. It just made it a little bit easier for me to manage because we wouldn't want her to gain weight. And to me, that's again, that's why I'm starting this channel and wanting to have a more nuanced conversation about this. So then when the baby was born, I continued vomiting for an additional 4 months. That's hyperemesis gravidarum HG is rare to begin with. It's only 2% of pregnancies. I don't know statistically what the rate of people who continue to have problems with nausea and vomiting is after, but with me, my nausea and vomiting, I think it was like half the after effects or afterlife of HG and half a completely inflamed band. And so then we were doing endoscopies, we were checking, and we had a can't remember what it's called. It's like a saline flush thing. It's mom brain. Anyway, so we were checking and everything, and as it turned out, in some weird, and this was kind of that turning point for me, my band had refilled itself up to 8 cc's of liquid. So it's a closed system. The only way something can get in or out is through admission through your port. So I don't know how I went back up to almost 8 cc's. Nobody knows how I went back up to 8 cc's. I certainly wasn't administering fluid to myself. So that was my first hint of like, oh fuck. I've seen all of my lapband compadres and contemporaries having problems. Now I guess it's my turn. At the same time, I was also just so fucking hungry. If you've ever given birth and breastfed, you probably remember that like the first 3 weeks you could eat another human being, like, because your milk production's happening, you've just had major surgery. I had a C-section. You're trying to heal, and in my case hadn't eaten very much at all for 9 months. I lost quite a bit of weight during that process. After I gave birth, I lost a ton of weight, so it was like my body was just, it was gaining and losing at the same time, if you understand what I mean. So it didn't show during pregnancy, but after I gave birth it did. And I was starving. So when everything finally, then they unfilled that mystery fluid and everything calmed down, and I was on quite a bit of medication, and it was a rough 4 months. As you know, 4 months postpartum is rough as it is, but when you're starving all the time, because I couldn't eat, because I knew that I would just throw it up, and it wasn't like an easy vomiting. It was an extremely painful vomiting, so to the point where you feel traumatized when you think about having to vomit again. All these things are happening. I finally am able to eat. I decide to do something called all in because I'm so fed up with all of it. And for some reason, the fact that I wasn't given any sort of medication until the very last 2.5 weeks of my pregnancy, to try to calm the vomiting in because they figured, oh, well, she's not going to want to gain weight. It just made me like go, fuck it. I'm just, after years of watching what I eat and getting less and less successful, it was harder and harder to toe the line. You could, everything, this was the part that was starting to get mind-blowing. Everything that I ate to lose weight was starting to be the things that I was eating to gain weight, but just in normal portions or eating to satisfy hunger. I wasn't binge eating, I wasn't overeating, which isn't to say I never have a binge or I never overeat. It happens sometimes. Usually for me, my overeating comes when, like, I'm, again, young kids miss a meal or only eat a little bit or only eat their scraps, and then I find myself overeating in the evening. But generally speaking, it's not really an issue for me anymore. It was many, many years ago, but it was one of the things that I worked on with my surgery and after my surgery, and then even just during that period of weight loss. My relationship with food had changed permanently. You can't be that much smaller and have put in all of that work for a decade and not have changed some of your patterns. Like, it would have been, if I was fucking around, I would have gained all of that weight back a lot faster, right? So when I did go all in, I allowed myself to eat whatever I wanted. And for the first 2 months, it was just like whatever I wanted to eat. And I did, and I just ate all the things. And I think that was really, looking back on it with hindsight being 2020, it was very much a reaction to what happened during HG and just feeling so fed up with it, but also a physical, uncontrollable reaction. Like when you hear about someone recovering from anorexia, you hear about the gnawing hunger, and that's, like it was a lot of physical factors driving me to eat. And then once I finally felt full, I didn't need to do that anymore, and I just kind of returned to my regular relationship with food. I had gained quite a bit of weight where I am now, so I went from 190 pounds to 252 pounds on any given day. And I've been here now for almost 2 years, and I thought, okay, well, these were all, I've gone back to my normal eating patterns. These are all the foods that I ate before to lose weight. I will do that again. I even tried silly things like keto and stuff like that. And I don't believe in those kinds of diets that are highly restrictive. And I waited and I did my journaling and and I still haven't been able to lose weight. And I feel like if when you look at long term, the research around weight loss and maintenance, the only way for me, I feel, to lose a significant amount of weight fairly painlessly, because I will take surgery over keto any day. Like the idea that I can't just have a sweet potato or some berries or something like that is insane to me, and that I'd only be able to have 5 to 8 of them at any given time. Like that kind of restrictive sort of stuff. I would rather just like have small portions of everything and anything than to live like that. That sounds like hell to me. And so I would rather take a surgery that makes my stomach smaller, that has a higher success rate of being able to maintain it, than constantly trying to diet towards something that I wouldn't be able to maintain over the long run, because your body will start to try to sabotage your efforts. And the reason why I think I was able to maintain that weight loss in the past is because I had that tool that made it physically impossible for me to eat anything more than a small amount of food at any given time. Even with my BMR rate being much lower and things being a lot harder, etc., because your body nature is fighting back, even still, that tiny little component right there, that thing, that restrictive tool, is what makes it more successful than a traditional diet. Having said all of that, though, and this is again goes back to that part about like that nuanced discussion, I think it's really sad that there's a whole generation of women, such as myself, who, like, I wish I could just be in this larger body and be okay with it, but I'm not. The damage has been done for me in terms of diet mentality and diet culture, and feeling the effects of unconscious bias towards fat people, and the unconscious positive feelings towards thinner people. When I was thinner, my life was just so much easier. Honestly, it was more fulfilling in a lot of ways, and not because of the way I saw myself, but the way that I was treated and how other people thought of me. I was given millions more opportunities, the benefit of the doubt. My boundaries were way more respected. When I said no, I didn't have to say it like 15 times. It was just no. And if anything, people would be like, oh, I'm so sorry. I won't do that again. Like, just everything about living, especially as a woman in a larger body, is harder. And I'm aware that obviously I have a higher economic privilege. I'm a white woman in a larger body. Like, there's definitely harder things out there. But knowing, having been in that smaller body and living in it for a really long time, that's how addictive being thin is that I would rather have surgery to make my stomach the size of a toddler's and try to work and make it like basically a full-time job or a part-time job to try to maintain that, than to live life in a larger body. And I don't want it to be that way forever. I feel that we are on the tide of a huge amount of change, and I'm hoping that this next generation of women, like, I'm not telling you to have gastric sleeve surgery or any kind of bariatric surgery. I'm actually hoping that this, my confession, if you will, or my discussion, or like my lens, will be a part of a bigger discussion about changing the way that we view fat people and fatness, and start to see it as just a natural variation, so that we're not creating this huge diet culture. We're not making people that are in naturally larger bodies even larger through useless diets that they yo-yo on and off of, that they don't get the same economic opportunities, they don't get the same access to respectful medical care, that we would rather have surgery and change our bodies and basically have surgical anorexia or bulimia in the case of the lap band than live in these bodies. And I think that it's, like I said, for me, in terms of diet culture and everything, the damage is already done, and I've already lived on the other side of the fence, and I know it's a lot better and easier. It's almost like there's just no comparison. And so I'm doing it again, and I'm going to document the journey, but I'm also going to talk about my ambivalence and talk about the nuance around it, because I have that experience. I had more than 10 years living with bariatric surgery and the sacrifices that you naturally have to make, and now, of course, I know I'll be right in the thick of it again. And I think that is something that's kind of missing in this community, is the long-term effects and the ambivalence factor. So that was the longest intro ever. I am surprised if anybody watched the whole thing, and I'm going to be back in like 2 seconds with a video about how I am preparing for surgery this time around, and some of the differences that I'm noticing from 12, 13 years ago to now. Okay, thank you if you actually watched this, and even if you didn't, thank you. And don't forget to hit subscribe, hit the like button, and if you left a comment or question or anything like that, I'd love it. That would be so cool. Thank you. Bye.